We're always going from 0 to whatever my range is, right? One of the things that we're going to find out is that I can actually define the range. I don't have to start at 0. I can start somewhere else if I want. So what we can do is give a start. And the start is going to be inclusive. And I can give the end, which is going to be exclusive. That means whatever I give as a start value, it will always include, just like it always starts at 0. Whatever I give as the end value is exclusive because it never got to 15. It only ever got to 14, right? But I can define a range. So let's say, for instance, that I want for count in range. Oh, let's say that I wanted to start at 5 and I wanted to go up to 10. It is actually going to begin at 5, but the 10 is exclusive just like it is all the rest of the time. So let's print my counter variable. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it includes the 5, it excludes the 10. Can we define the range, but we can also define the increment. I can tell it what I want it to increment by. What is it default incrementing? By 1. Defaults to increment by 1. I can tell it what I want to increment. Define the increment. I'll even call it increment by, because that's got to be good grammar. So I'm going to force a new line, and I'm going to say for count in range. This time inside of here, I'm going to put some starting point. So let's start at, I don't know, let's start at 12. And I would like to increment by, oh, let's increment by 3s, because who can't count by 3s starting at 12? So let's print, oops, this has to be a for loop. I'm going to print my counter variable and see what's in it. Starting at 12, incrementing by 3s until I reach 21 would have been 27. But since that's too large, since my end is 26, it doesn't get all the way there. So I can change my increment by, or I can control what I increment by. And if I can control what I increment by, I should be able to count down, right? So let's say, for instance, that I wanted to start at 100, and I wanted to stop when I get to 15. I'm going to increment by a negative value. Let's force that new line. Where's my new line? Oh, we only went to 60. Remember the first one, so we should have started at 100. There's my 100. I incremented by a negative number, which had the effect of counting down. In theory, if I had started at 0, it would have counted negative. So I counted all the way down to my end value. Never actually got to my end value. It stops one shy of it. One of the things that you need to be very, very careful about, especially in Code Sculptor, I have to be very careful of my start and end values and my increment by, because the condition, it exits the for loop when the condition becomes false. If I set my counter variable to 0, and I set it to range 5, it sets it to 0, 0 is less than 5, it executes it and then increments the counter variable to 1. Is 1 less than 5? Yep, executes it and increments it to 2. Is 2 less than 5? And it continues until it says, oh, it's not. And as soon as the answer to that statement is no, it drops out of the for loop. Well, what happens if the statement is never false? So let's say, for instance, I said for count in range, let's do 0 to 10, and I'm going to increment by a negative 1, which means it's going to set my counter variable to 0. 0 is less than 10, it's going to decrement it to a negative 1. Well, negative 1 is less than 10, it's going to decrement it to negative 2, and ultimately I'm going to get trapped in what is called an infinite loop. Oh, that's nice. I've had it lock the browser up before, so that's nice. If you were in an IDE, a different IDE on your machine, you might be able to watch it count down. And it would just continue to count, negative 1, negative 2, negative, until your machine ran out of memory, or it exceeded the capacity of an integer variable. It would just count and then just continue. And you would just see it tripping through numbers. So I have to be careful of infinite loops. I have to be careful that at some point my condition will become false so that I can drop out of the for loop. The condition will never become false, so I'm going to comment this out. Because if I am on an IDE, if I run this program on an IDE that will actually run it and display it, I don't want to blow up the program. So the fact that I can count down just by changing my increment or my increment value to a negative means that we should be able to do my famous counting program version 2.0. Counting cookies 2.0. Because I said the first counting cookies wasn't very accurate, because that's not really what he does. But he's going to say 10 cookies, 9 cookies, 8 cookies, 7 cookies. When he finally gets to that last and final beautiful cookie, then he will say, 1 cookie, how am I going to get it to do? If statement, yeah. Because the vast majority of the time, I just want him counting down cookies. But there is one time when I want him to say something different. And if I want to do that within a looping structure, we're going to nest an if statement inside of that looping structure. So let's see if one more time. Instead of just hard coding it to some value, I'm going to ask them how many cookies are in the jar. And so I'm going to create a variable. I'll make it an integer. I'm going to ask them how many cookies are in the jar. And then we're going to say for range, count in range cookies. That is going to be my beginning point. My end point is going to be 0. Remember, it will never reach my end point. And then we want to count down, so I'm going to decrement it by a -1. I'm going to say if my counter variable is not equal to 1, we wanted to print, he can't 10 cookies, 9 cookies, do I want count cookies. Else, we're going to see if we have to increment my counter variable by 1, if we have to add 1 to it. Because we're starting at 15 and counting down to 1, I don't expect that I'm going to have to add 1 to it. Otherwise, we are going to print 1 cookie. I have 1 cookie, and I'm just going to print statement because I can. We're going to say 1 cookie, so that's count cookie. He says 1 cookie. I have 1 cookie. What did we say? How did we spell it, Luke? I remember now. That was too long ago. W-A-8. And then we're really very, very excited about that. There you go. 1 cookie. I have 1 cookie. Now we're going to see if this is version 2.0 that people will pay 17 cents for. Oh, I have no print. Excellent. Thank you very much. I forgot my print. Thank you very much. Bad input. No comma after this count. Excellent catch, gentlemen. No comma after the count. Run it one more time. So we're going to say 12 cookies. See if he counts down. 12, 11, 10. 1 cookie. I have 1 cookie. So I can define what the begin point is. I can define what the end point is. And I can define what I increment by. Very flexible. For loops are excellent if I know how many times I want to run it. I can either hard code it to a begin or end value, or I can capture that from the user, or I can get that information from somewhere else. We're going to also find out that I can use a for loop to iterate through things that are not numbers.